Good evening, gentle soul. Tonight, let us drift across silver waters, where dreams are stitched from stars, and a quiet tailor mends the endless night with golden thread. Far beyond the lands marked by any map, beyond the mountains, the valleys, and even the oldest of dreams, there floated a boat unlike any other. It was not built from wood, nor carved from stone, but spun, long ago, from the silver threads of purest moonlight. In this small, swaying vessel, lived a tailor, a soul whose name had long been forgotten by the world. His hair was pale as frost, his eyes as calm as the slow-moving tides, and his hands were forever busy, stitching, weaving, mending the very fabric of forgotten wishes. Around him, bolts of cloth lay folded like sleeping birds, cloth spun from dreams themselves, soft, shimmering, whispering. Some shimmered faintly with starlight, others glowed, ever so gently, like lanterns floating through mist. Each piece held a secret, a sigh, a memory too tender to name. The tailor's task was quiet, endless, and he did not mind. Each day and night, he sewed cloaks for the drifters of the endless sea, dreamers, wanderers, souls that had lost their way between one breath and the next. No one ever called for him, they simply arrived, like mist, like a thought, and he welcomed them without a word. One evening, as twilight spilled like honey across the rippling waves, he noticed something strange. A tear in the sea itself, a thin, trembling line, silver-bright, glistening as if the ocean had been stitched poorly, and the thread had come undone. Setting aside his golden needle, folding the half-finished cloak carefully in his lap, the tailor leaned over the edge of his moonlight boat. With the lightest touch of one fingertip, he brushed the tear. At once, the sea began to hum, a low, velvety sound, deep, slow, like the beginning of a lullaby. The tear quivered, widened, and from it rose a mist, soft and pearl-colored, curling like a sleeping cat stretching in the warmth. The tailor sat back, slow, steady, his heart like a quiet drum. Something was changing, something ancient, and new, and the endless sea, for the first time in many nights, seemed to breathe with a deeper kind of dream. That night, the tailor did not sleep. Sleep, his usual companion, light as a feather drifting down, hovered just beyond reach. Instead, he sat at the prow of his tiny vessel, the mist wrapping around him like a shawl, needle in hand, mending a sail stitched from twilight itself. The sea was silent, save for the soft hush of water caressing the boat's sides, and the faint, golden ticking of his thoughts. Now and then, a wisp of the strange mist would drift across his face, cool as breath against a windowpane. Sometimes, in the space between the sighs of the sea, he thought he heard words. Not loud words, not even clear ones, but the kind of words dreams speak, when they are just beginning to form. And then, something tugged at the boat. A tiny nudge, barely more than a kiss of current. The tailor set down his silver needle, rose slowly, and peered over the side. Caught gently in the webbing of his moonlit boat, was a spool of thread. It gleamed in the darkness, not with ordinary light, but with the soft glow of deep memory, the kind that flickers behind closed eyelids just before sleep. Carefully, he drew it up into his hands. The thread shimmered, shifting colors, dusky blue, soft gold, muted violet, as if it had captured all the skies that ever were. It was delicate beyond belief, yet when he cradled it in his palms, it felt heavier than the oldest story ever told. He turned it over, slowly, reverently, and saw that the thread was not neatly wound. No. It trailed away from the spool, slipping over the side of the boat, stretching far, far across the sea, leading somewhere unseen. Far on the horizon, where the sky met the breathing waters, a faint point of light shimmered. Small, patient, waiting. Without hesitation, without fear, the tailor lifted the tiny, silver anchor of his boat. He wrapped the beginning of the thread around his finger, and let the boat drift, following the shimmering path through the endless, whispering night. And the sea, cradling him like a mother cradles a dream, opened its arms a little wider, and let him pass. The boat, carried by the invisible pull of the thread, drifted through seas of velvet mist, where the stars leaned down so low, they might have kissed the water. For a long time, or perhaps no time at all, the tailor sat quietly, his hands resting in his lap, the thread cradled carefully in his fingers. Around him, the world breathed, slow, deep, as if dreaming. Then, through the silver veils of mist, shapes began to form. First, they were only shadows, long, slender, wavering like candle smoke. But little by little, as the boat drew closer, they grew clearer. An island emerged, pale as dawn, crowned with towers of slender bells. The bells were tall, some stretching toward the sky like trees, while others curled low to the ground, their shapes tender, round. They were silver, soft as moonbeams, each bell glistening with a quiet light, as if the stars themselves had polished them by hand. But, though the wind moved among them, though the mist kissed their smooth curves, not one of them made a sound. The tailor's boat kissed the soft, pearly sands of the shore. He stepped lightly onto the island, the thread still twining from his hand, trailing behind him like a sleeping thought. He moved among the bells, slowly, reverently, touching them with fingertips worn smooth by 1,000 nights of sewing. They were cool to the touch, whispering nothing, yet somehow listening. As he walked, the tailor heard echoes, but not of chimes or songs. Instead, it was laughter, distant, gentle, the laughter of children running through meadows unseen. A lullaby, sung in a voice made of wind. A farewell, soft as falling leaves. The bells were not meant to ring, he understood. They were meant to remember. And as he walked among them, the tailor bowed his head, listening, honoring all that the island had kept safe within its silent, silver heart. Beyond the last cluster of bells, at the farthest edge of the island, the thread tugged softly once more, drawing the tailor onward. There, nestled between two gentle hills of misty grass, stood something that was not quite a door, and not quite a gate. It was made of air itself, woven thickly, like a tapestry, shivering with colors unseen by waking eyes. Soft blues, tender golds, faint lilacs, the hues of dreams just before they slip away. The tailor paused, the end of the thread winding gently around his wrist, as if urging him closer. He studied the door, marveled at the way it breathed, slow and deep, as if it, too, were alive. There was no handle, no lock, no hinge. only the shimmer of woven air, waiting. Very carefully, with hands that knew the weight of wishes, he reached out. His fingertips brushed the surface, and at once, the door began to unfurl, like a flower blooming in time with the stars. A path appeared, winding away from the island, not across the sea, but through the very fabric of mist and light. It was made of something softer than clouds, yet steadier than stone. The tailor hesitated, only for a breath, then stepped forward. And as he passed through the doorway of woven air, the thread in his hand gleamed brighter, the bells behind him whispered their silent farewells, and the sea, far below, shivered with quiet joy. Ahead, the mist thickened, coiling into new shapes, new lands, unseen. And somewhere beyond the veil, something, or someone, was waiting for him. The path through the mist was softer than silk, cool beneath the tailor's feet, steady and sure, yet shifting ever so slightly, like a sigh caught between dreams. Around him, the world changed, the silver mists thinning into soft fields of color, pale greens, ghostly blues, the faintest touch of rose. Before long, the path opened into a vast, quiet meadow. The grass there shimmered with dew, though no sun had ever risen, and scattered across the meadow were stones, round, smooth, worn by time. They moved. Not quickly, not sharply, but slowly, dreamily, as if they were sleepwalking through the endless fields. Each stone shifted an inch this way, a breath that way, so gently that one might miss it if they looked too hard. The tailor, thread wrapped loosely around his wrist, stepped softly among them. He watched the stones, listened to their silence. Some hummed faintly, a note too low to hear, but easy to feel, a hum that seemed to resonate deep inside his chest. Others simply glowed, tiny and tender, like embers left in a hearth after midnight. There was no hurry here. No fear. The stones drifted in their slow dance, remembering old currents, old winds, old hands that had once shaped them and set them free. The tailor smiled, a small, quiet smile that belonged only to the stones, and the mist, and the endless, sighing sea. Following the thread, he wove gently between the wandering stones, careful not to disturb their slow, dreaming journey, until, at last, he came to the meadow's far edge. There, rising out of the earth like a thought blooming into a word, was a single archway of twisted wood and woven ivy. The thread, glowing gently, slipped through the arch. And the tailor, with the patience of the tide, followed. Beyond the arch, the world changed again. The ground fell away, and the tailor stood upon a narrow cliff of silver stone, overlooking a sea that was not made of water. Below him, an ocean of mist rolled and breathed, vast, slow, and shimmering. In it floated islands, and in the distance, a single, solitary boat. It was not made for moonlight, as his own boat had been. No. This vessel was built from something even older, scraps of forgotten sky, stitched together with twilight, patched with the songs of distant, sleeping stars. Its sides shimmered with deep hues, navy, violet, soft black, colors that seemed to drink in the starlight and then breathe it back out again, softer, rounder, sweeter. The thread in the tailor's hand tugged once, twice, urging him down a soft, spiraling path that wound from the cliff to the misty shore. There, waiting for him beside the dream ocean, was the boat, and beside the boat, something else. A lantern. It was a strange, lovely thing, not made of glass or brass, but of woven reeds, strung together with bits of frozen light. Inside it glowed a single, gentle flame, a flame that did not burn, but pulsed with slow, tender breaths. The tailor reached out, lifted the lantern carefully in both hands, feeling its warmth seep into his fingers, into his bones, into the deep, still corners of his heart. And as he stepped into the boat of forgotten sky, the lantern flickered once, twice, and the thread wound itself into a soft, shining knot around his wrist. The sea of mist shivered with silent welcome. The boat, with no oars, no sail, no rudder, began to drift. Drift, and drift, into the deeper dreaming yet to come. The boat drifted, slow as breath, across the endless, mist-wrapped ocean. Above, the stars spun in quiet spirals, not hurried, not restless, but content, as if they, too, were dreaming. The tailor sat with the lantern cupped in his hands, the thread still wrapped gently around his wrist. He watched the mist roll by, thick and soft, the world around him humming in a voice too low for words. Soon, from the folds of the mist, came the flutter of wings. Tiny wings, delicate, whispering. The tailor lifted his head, eyes wide but soft, as a cloud of moths floated into view. They were not ordinary moths, oh, no. Their wings shimmered with forgotten colors, the blue of childhood promises, the pink of first dawns, the gold of laughter at twilight. Each moth carried a single note, a sound so small, so pure, it could barely be heard. Together, as they drifted around the boat, they sang. Not in words, not in songs made by mouths and tongues, but in the soft weaving of sound that brushed against the heart. The tailor listened, and for a moment, he remembered. The sound of rain on old windows. The smell of warm bread in a kitchen left behind. The hush of a hand slipping into his own, long, long ago. The moths circled once, twice, 3 times around the boat, their song weaving itself into the very fabric of the mist. And then, as softly as they had come, they floated away. Vanishing into the folds of silver air, leaving only a memory of warmth behind. The tailor sat very still, lantern glowing, heart quiet. The boat, unhurried, drifted onward. Into deeper seas, into older dreams, into softer nights. The mist began to thin, stretching into long, delicate ribbons, like silk pulled gently by unseen hands. Through the parting veils, a new sight revealed itself, soft, shimmering, strange. It was a market. Not bustling, not loud, but slow-moving, dreamlike. Stalls built from woven branches, tables carved from driftwood, lamps strung from vines and starlight. The tailor's boat nudged against a shore made not of sand, but of velvet moss, warm beneath his feet. He stepped out, the lantern swinging gently at his side, the thread still tugging, tender and sure. The market was filled with forgotten things. A teacup, chipped and smiling, still holding the scent of jasmine. A pair of worn boots, carrying the dust of 1,000 travels. A wooden bird, wings paused mid-flight, whispering of winds long gone. There were no shopkeepers, no buyers. Only the slow, sweet drift of memories, fluttering through the air like dandelion seeds. The tailor walked among the stalls, each step stirring tiny motes of light from the mossy ground. Now and then, he paused, touching a broken compass, a ribbon faded to the soft color of sighs, a bell that no longer rang. Each thing pulsed faintly with the life it once knew, and still, somehow, carried. The thread guided him, not hurried, not pulling, but gently leading him to a small stall tucked behind a curtain of vines. There, upon a cloth of midnight blue, lay a single pair of scissors. Old, delicate, gleaming with a light that was not entirely of this world. The tailor smiled, a deep, knowing smile. He understood. Very carefully, he lifted the scissors. The thread at his wrist shimmered, tightened, then loosened again, content. The tailor placed the scissors in his pocket, and turned back toward the waiting boat. The journey was not yet done. The sea of mist sighed in welcome, and the stars, above, blinked slowly, as if in blessing. The boat rocked gently, barely stirring the sea of mist as it drifted away from the market of forgotten things. The tailor sat once more, lantern glowing faintly by his side, the newly found scissors resting in his pocket, warm against his heart. The thread, fine as spider silk, shimmered in the night air, leading him onward, onward, into places where even dreams dared not tread too quickly. Time fell away. Only the soft breathing of the sea remained, and the distant, patient twinkling of stars. After a long while, or perhaps no while at all, the mist began to gather again. It thickened, twisted, rising into the shape of a great loom. It was not built from wood or iron. It was spun from shadow and light, held together by the soft wishes of 1,000 sleeping worlds. Before it, sitting on a stool carved from forgotten moons, was the weaver. The weaver's face could not be seen, not clearly, for it changed with every blink of the eye, sometimes young, sometimes old, sometimes neither. Their hands, however, were steady, sure, moving with a grace that belonged to no clock and no season. They wove the mist itself, thread by thread, line by line, creating endless tapestries that hung in the air like suspended sighs. The tailor drifted closer, the thread at his wrist quivering softly in greeting. The weaver paused, lifted their head, and without a word, beckoned him forward. From the folds of his coat, the tailor brought forth the scissors. He cradled them in both hands, and offered them up, like an offering to a sacred river. The weaver accepted them with a nod slow as winter dawn, and with one delicate snip, cut the air before them. A door opened. A door made not of wood, nor glass, but of possibility itself. The tailor, lantern swaying gently at his side, stepped through. Beyond the door, silence. Not empty silence, no, it was full, full to the brim with life too soft to shout, too sacred to sing aloud. The tailor stood upon a bridge of woven kelp and pearl, stretching over a vast, underwater garden. All around him, strange flowers bloomed, soft corals in colors no painter's brush could name, petals of mist, vines that climbed slowly through the water, as if reaching for unseen stars. Tiny fish, glowing faintly, flickered between the blossoms like fireflies adrift in the current. Each movement, each shimmer, sent ripples of gentle music through the water, a lullaby played on strings of liquid light. The thread still danced between the tailor's fingers, tugging ever so gently toward the heart of the garden. He followed. Step after slow step, feeling the coolness of the water kiss his skin, though he remained quite dry, feeling the music wrap around his heart like a beloved old song. At the very center of the garden stood a tree, though no tree of earth had ever looked like this. Its trunk was silver and glassy, its leaves wide and soft, like silk scarves spun by patient hands. Nestled among the roots, resting as if asleep, was a bundle, small, wrapped in cloth woven from mist and memory. The tailor knelt, cradled the bundle in his arms, and found within it a cloak. It was unfinished, its threads loose, its edges fluttering, longing for completion. The tailor understood, without needing words. This was why he had been called across the endless sea. This was the dream left undone, the wish still waiting to be sewn into the world. Holding the cloak carefully against his heart, he rose. The lantern flared softly, joyfully. The thread shimmered with quiet pride. And the sea, beneath, around, and above him, sighed its endless, loving song. The tailor carried the unfinished cloak across the bridge of woven kelp. His lantern glowing like a star cupped in two careful hands. The mist around him deepened once more, folding him into its silver arms, cradling him as a mother cradles her sleeping child. He returned to his boat, the boat made from scraps of forgotten sky, and laid the cloak across his knees. The thread, still wound around his wrist, shimmered brighter now, as if it, too, felt the nearness of something precious, something sacred. With slow, patient fingers, the tailor began to sew. He stitched by the light of the lantern, with the scissors given by the market of forgotten things, and the needle he had always carried, polished by countless midnights. Each stitch was a whisper, a memory, a sigh. Each loop of thread wove the cloak closer to its true shape, not hurried, never hurried, but with a quiet certainty, as steady as the turning of the tides. Around him, the mist thickened, softened, until it seemed he floated in a cradle of clouds. And above, unseen but deeply felt, the stars leaned lower, lower, watching with ancient, loving eyes. The tailor worked until the last thread was tucked in, the last seam kissed by his gentle touch. The cloak now shimmered with all the softness of the endless sea, all the music of sleeping moths, all the patience of the weaver's loom, all the love of the deep, sighing waters. He folded it carefully, held it close, and the mist, tender as a lullaby, wrapped around him, and the boat, and the lantern, and the endless, dreaming night. When the tailor next opened his eyes, he was no longer drifting. His little moonlit boat had returned, soft and certain, to the heart of the endless sea he had always known. The sea that had cradled him for longer than memory, longer than names. The mist was thinner here, the stars clearer, each one blinking slowly, like a guardian keeping watch over a slumbering world. The cloak rested across his lap, finished, and waiting. The thread, now quiet, had slipped from his wrist, its work complete. The lantern glowed with a gentle, steady light, no longer bright, but content, like a heart at peace. The tailor sat for a long time, or perhaps only a moment, listening to the soft hush of the waters, feeling the deep, endless breathing of the world. At last, he lifted the cloak, folded it once more with care, and set it into a small, carved chest he kept near the prow. It would wait there, until the one who needed it most found their way to him, carried by mist, or memory, or dream. The tailor smiled, slow, tender, deep. The kind of smile that belonged not to beginnings, nor endings, but to the endless in-between. He lifted his golden needle, picked up a fresh piece of dream cloth, and began to sew once more. Above him, the stars spun their patient, sleepy spirals. Around him, the endless sea sighed its slow, sweet lullaby. And the tailor, ever faithful, ever gentle, drifted onward, stitching dreams into the very fabric of forever. Come quietly, and follow a path that weaves itself with each sleepy step. A whispering map waits for a wanderer, and together, they will journey into lands only the heart can find. In a forest where the trees grew tall enough to stroke the clouds, and the air smelled always of rain and old stories, there lived a wanderer. No one knew quite where he had come from, nor where he was going. Not even the wanderer himself. He wore a coat stitched from many patches, each one a memory, soft and worn. He carried a satchel that jingled faintly with tiny treasures, a feather, a stone, a silver thimble, a key with no door. But most of all, he carried a heart full of quiet wonder. One evening, as the sun folded itself into the hills, and twilight unrolled across the land like a velvet carpet, the wanderer stumbled upon an ancient tree. It was hollow, not dead, but sleeping, and in its hollow belly, something waited. A map. Not a map like others, drawn in neat lines and tidy names. No, this map was stitched from soft cloth, embroidered with threads that shimmered in the fading light. The rivers curled like sleeping cats, the mountains unfurled like scrolls, and the paths, oh, the paths, they moved. As the wanderer watched, the map breathed. A sigh, a stirring, the lines shifting gently, like the dreams of the earth itself. He reached out, hands slow, reverent, and the map whispered. Not words exactly, but feelings, like the brush of wind against the cheek, the taste of rain, the ache of distant bells at sunset. The map wanted him to follow. The wanderer, who had never needed much convincing to chase a mystery, smiled. He folded the map carefully, it curled against his fingers, like a sleepy bird, and tucked it into his satchel. The forest around him deepened into shadows, the first stars blinking awake overhead. And with a quiet heart and a steady step, the wanderer set out, following a path that had not been there a moment before. The path wove through the forest like a ribbon dropped by careless hands. It dipped and rose, curled and stretched, always just ahead, shimmering faintly in the deepening twilight. The wanderer walked slowly, savoring the hush of the woods, the murmur of leaves overhead, the soft crunch of moss beneath his boots. The map, tucked in his satchel, stirred now and then, a gentle rustle, like a cat turning in its sleep. Each time it shifted, the path before him shifted too, always opening, always inviting. After some time, or perhaps none at all, the trees parted, and he found himself standing before a river. It was not a grand river, not wide or rushing. It was a river meant for quiet things, for pebbles, for reeds, for the slow drift of petals from unseen gardens. The water sang. Not in words, no, no, but in soft, rounded notes. The kind a stone might hum as it nestled deeper into the riverbed. The kind a cloud might sigh as it brushed the edge of the sky. The wanderer knelt at the water's edge, watching tiny fish flash like silver needles through the current. He cupped his hands, drank, and found the water tasted of forgotten fruits, of mornings long lost, of laughter that once filled empty rooms. The map stirred again, a single, sleepy flutter, and he knew. The river, too, had a path hidden within its song. He waded in, boots and all, the water cool and welcoming around his ankles. The stones shifted as he walked, not to trip him, but to guide him, little nudges, little pushes, turning his steps this way, that way, gently, patiently. Above him, the stars sang in their own slow, silver tongues. And the wanderer, heart open, hands empty but ready, followed the song of the river, deeper into the dream-soaked world. The river's song grew softer, slower, until at last, it faded into silence. The wanderer stepped out onto a shore made not of sand, but of moss, thick and springy, cool against his worn boots. Before him stretched a meadow, endless, golden green, humming with the breath of unseen life. And there, hidden among the folds of the hills, slept a village. Not built from stone, nor wood, nor any hard thing, but grown, like wildflowers, from the earth itself. The houses were soft mounds, domed with grass, their windows like dewdrops, their chimneys puffing faint threads of mist into the air. No footsteps stirred the worn paths. No voices called across the fields. Only the slow, steady, breathing of dreams. The wanderer walked among the sleeping homes, feeling a hush wrap around him, not cold, not lonely, but warm, welcome, old as the roots beneath his feet. Here and there, tiny lamps glowed at the doorways, lanterns made from hollowed stones and woven reeds, their light pulsing like the slow beat of a sleeping heart. The map, tucked in his satchel, pressed softly against his side, urging him forward, forward, toward the heart of the village. There, at the very center, stood a well. Its stones were worn smooth by countless seasons. Its water so still it reflected not only the sky, but the dreams tucked inside it. The wanderer leaned over the edge, gazed down into the deep, shining dark. He saw not his own face, but visions drifting across the surface. A pair of hands planting seeds in rich soil. A lullaby hummed beside a cradle of moss. A journey once begun, and never quite finished. The map stirred again, softer this time, like a sigh. The path forward was waiting. And so, with a heart full of quiet wonder, the wanderer stepped away from the well, following the dream thread deeper into the hills. The path wound upward now, rising gently, like a melody climbing toward its sweetest note. The wanderer climbed slowly, the grass brushing against his boots, the cool breath of the night kissing his cheeks. Above him, the stars unfurled in their endless, patient dance, spinning, breathing, blinking, so slow it could only be seen by hearts that had forgotten how to hurry. At the crest of the hill, the world opened wide. The forest behind him murmured softly in its sleep. The river below curled like a silver ribbon, tucked beneath a dreaming land. And the village, tucked safely into the folds of the meadow, breathed in time with the earth. The wanderer stood very still. The map, worn soft from the warmth of his journey, fluttered once more against his side. He pulled it from his satchel, unfolded it carefully, and there, upon the cloth, saw a new mark stitched in silver thread. A single star. Not in the sky, but here, on the hill. He knelt. Placed his hand against the soft earth. Listened. And the hill answered, not with words, but with a feeling, a warmth that traveled up through his fingers, through his arms, into his heart. It was welcome. It was belonging. It was the feeling of a story waiting to be told, but not yet needing to be spoken aloud. The wanderer smiled, slow, wide, deep, and lay back upon the hill, gazing up at the sky stitched with its million stars. And for the first time in many, many nights, he let himself drift into dreams that knew the shape of his soul. The wanderer woke as the first blush of dawn kissed the edge of the sky, not with loudness, not with hurry, but with the hush of a breath taken between dreams. He sat up slowly, the moss cool against his palms, the scent of dew thick in the air. The map lay across his chest, shimmering faintly, stitched lines weaving and unweaving in a slow, secret dance. As he rose to his feet, the world seemed to tilt, not unsteadily, but gently, as if it were inviting him to notice things usually hidden. At the far side of the hill, where the grass met the mist, a door had appeared. It was not built from wood, nor carved from stone. It was woven from pure morning, the soft gold of first light, the palest blush of waking clouds, the sweet warmth of a sun not yet seen. The door pulsed slightly, like a heart, waiting. The wanderer walked toward it, each step slower than the last, as though he feared the moment might float away if he moved too quickly. When he reached it, he did not knock. He did not call. He simply placed his hand, steady, open, against its woven surface. The door dissolved beneath his fingers, unfolding like a flower kissed by rain. And beyond it, a new path. Narrow, winding, bathed in soft mist, lit only by the gentle silver of dreaming stars reluctant to leave the sky. The map quivered once, eager in his hand. The wanderer, heart wide as the horizon, stepped through the door made of morning. And the world, behind him, sighed in blessing. The new path led him down into a hollow so deep, it seemed carved not by hands, but by the slow breathing of the earth itself. Here, the mist thickened, sweet and heavy, clinging to the folds of his coat, pooling at his boots, weaving its fingers into his hair. And there, spanning the hollow, was a bridge. It was delicate, so slender it seemed a whisper might tear it apart, and spun from threads of silver and dreams. It shivered with every breath of mist, every sigh of the hidden world. The wanderer hesitated at its foot, feeling the faint tremble beneath his toes. But the bridge, old and kind, sang to him. It was not a loud song. It was the song of home. Not a place, not a house of wood and stone, but the feeling of belonging wherever one stood. The warmth of a fire never seen, but always felt. The touch of hands that had never left. The wanderer took a breath, slow, deep, and stepped onto the bridge. Each step made the bridge hum. A low, sweet note. A vibration that traveled up through the soles of his boots. Into his bones, into the very folds of his heart. The bridge swayed gently, but it did not falter. Neither did he. The mist closed around him, cool, forgiving. And the stars overhead, fading into the blush of day, sang softly, too. Singing him onward, onward, to whatever waited across the dreaming span. Beyond the bridge, the mist thinned, unfolding into a clearing so quiet, it seemed the world itself was listening. Here, a garden grew. Not planted with careful hands, but woven by the soft patience of time. The trees were tall and drowsy, their branches draped with garlands of moss and soft, whispering vines. The flowers, pale blue, tender gold, shy violet, opened their faces slowly, turning not toward a sun, but toward the sound of footsteps. Everywhere the wanderer stepped, the garden shifted, blooming a little brighter, sighing a little softer, as if greeting an old friend. He moved through it gently, his hands brushing the air, his heart moving slower than breath. The map, tucked safely against his chest, pulsed once with quiet joy. In the center of the garden stood a fountain. But no water spilled from it. Instead, from its cracked stone bowl, rose the sound of rain, soft, endless, falling only where no rain could be seen. The wanderer stood by the fountain for a long while, listening. He let the sound wash through him, the sound of growing things, of secrets whispered by seeds beneath the earth. Of promises kept quietly through the turning of countless silent seasons. He closed his eyes. He listened with his skin, his bones, his soul. And in that moment, without a single word spoken, he understood. This garden did not grow by sunlight, nor by rain. It grew by listening. It grew by patience. It grew because something, someone, believed it should. The wanderer smiled, a smile stitched from 1,000 quiet mornings, and bowed low to the sleeping garden. The path stirred at his feet, and he followed it onward. The garden faded behind him, swallowed once more by mist, until only the memory of its music lingered in the folds of his coat. The path wound downward now, curving like a dream slipping back into deeper sleep. The air grew cooler, thicker, fragrant with salt and the sweet decay of old driftwood. Ahead, lights twinkled, dim at first, then brighter, swaying like slow, golden fireflies caught in the breath of the sea. The wanderer came to a harbor. But it was no ordinary harbor. The boats there floated not on water, but on mist. Their sails stitched from forgotten songs. Their hulls patched with the soft laughter of lost travelers. Lanterns lined the docks, tiny, glowing orbs woven from reed and paper and stardust. Each one cradling a small, patient flame. There were no sailors, no merchants, no bustling feet. Only the quiet breathing of the harbor, the slow bobbing of mist boats against the sighing docks. The map stirred faintly. The wanderer knew. One of the boats was waiting for him. It did not call out. It did not rush. It simply waited, as sure as a hand held open beneath a falling leaf. The wanderer chose the boat with a lantern that pulsed most softly. A rhythm so slow and deep, it seemed to match the beating of his own heart. He stepped aboard. The mist closed around the vessel like a mother's arms. And slowly, ever so slowly, the boat drifted away from the forgotten harbor. Into waters woven only from dreams. The boat, adrift on the mist, moved without oars, without sails, without sound. The wanderer sat near the prow, his coat drawn close around him, the map cradled gently in his lap. And he listened to the hush of the world folding around him. Hours passed, or perhaps they didn't. For time, in this place, had forgotten how to measure itself. At last, through the mist, a shape emerged. An island, small, round, floating lightly as if the earth itself had exhaled and let it drift free. The boat touched the island's edge, no jolt, no splash, just a tender sigh of mist against mist. The wanderer stepped ashore. The island was empty. No trees, no houses, no stones. Only soft ground, silvered with dew, and shadows. The shadows moved. Not sharply, not cruelly, but slowly, dreamily. Slipping across the ground like memories trying to find their way home. They were shapes of things forgotten. A little boat with broken sails. A bell whose rope had frayed away. A hand reaching upward, caught forever in a silent plea. The wanderer moved carefully among them, his boots barely pressing into the misty ground. He understood without needing to be told. These were not things lost. They were things remembered, too tender, too fragile, left here to sleep in peace. The map stirred once against his chest, as if whispering soon, soon. The wanderer bowed to the sleeping shadows. And as he turned back toward the boat, one shadow, light as a moth's wing, followed him. It settled into the folds of his coat, not to burden, but to belong. Together, they drifted back onto the mist. Toward the final place the map had yet to show. The mist thickened once more, soft and golden now, the color of the last light before sleep. The wanderer's boat slowed, until it rocked gently to a halt. There was no shore here, no dock, no call to land. Only the water, shimmering and still, and beneath it, a light. The wanderer gazed down, and saw a doorway, sunk into the quiet sea. It pulsed faintly, like the memory of a heartbeat, waiting, not demanding. Inviting him to step through. Without hesitation, the wanderer stepped lightly from the boat. The water parted for him, not cold, not wet, but folding away like a heavy velvet curtain. He sank downward, slower than a falling feather. Down. Down. Until he stood at the threshold of the doorway. Beyond it stretched a library, vast, endless, humming with the slow breath of dreams. The shelves were carved from coral and pearl. the books bound with driftwood and song. The lanterns hung in the water like little moons, casting soft spirals of light across the floor. The wanderer moved between the shelves, feeling their stories brush against his skin. A laugh sealed inside a bottle. A whispered goodbye stitched into a scarf. A kiss caught forever in a folded letter. At the heart of the library, the map slipped from his hand. It floated down, coming to rest on a pedestal of pale stone. And when it touched the stone, it blossomed, unfolding into a great, endless sea of stars. A tapestry of all the places he had wandered. And all the places still waiting to be found. The wanderer smiled, deep, slow, certain. He was exactly where he needed to be. And the library, vast and patient, welcomed him home. Deeper into the library the wanderer moved. His steps slow, his hands brushing the edges of ancient, sleeping shelves. The water around him shivered with soft light, pale as candle flame, deep as lullabies forgotten by the waking world. At the farthest edge of the library, hidden behind a veil of silver mist, he found a door. It was smaller than the others, made not of stone, nor coral, nor wood, but woven from the very hush between heartbeats. The wanderer touched it gently. It sighed open at his hand. Inside, a small room waited. Bare, simple, holding only a single chair, and a low table made of glass. Upon the table rested a book. It was closed. Its cover shimmered faintly, stitched with the soft lines of unseen constellations. There was no title, no lock, no key. The wanderer sat in the chair, worn smooth by 1,000 dreamers before him, and placed both hands on the table's cool surface. For a long, long moment, he simply breathed. Listened. The water outside the room sang very faintly. The distant, patient music of all things finding their way. The book pulsed beneath his fingertips, not hurried, not insistent, but tender, expectant. He opened it. And found not words, but a question. Written in soft, endless ink. A question he had carried in his heart long before he had ever seen the map. Where do you wish to go? The wanderer closed his eyes. Felt the map, the stars, the dreams, all breathing together within him. And in the deepest, quietest corner of his heart, he answered. When he opened his eyes again, the book had vanished. The table was bare. The chair beneath him lighter. The water around him glowing with soft, golden mist. The door before him now was new, a door woven from paths unseen, from promises unspoken, from the dreams he had only just begun to dream. The wanderer rose. Stepped lightly, surely, through the door. Beyond it, the mist unfolded into a new land. Not drawn by any cartographer's hand. Not stitched by any ancient needle. It was a land made from his own steps. His own hopes. His own quiet wonder. The grass curled softly at his ankles, whispering welcome. The rivers laughed gently, their waters clear and sweet. The hills hummed under the weight of sleeping bees. And far ahead, a path wound on and on. Not hurried, not ending, but always opening, always waiting. The wanderer smiled, a smile deep and wide as the first breath of morning. He tucked the memory of the map against his heart, though he knew, now, it was part of him forever. He adjusted the soft weight of his satchel, felt the light brush of the shadow that had followed him, and began to walk. One step. Another. Another still. The mist curled and sighed behind him. The stars blinked slow goodbyes overhead. And the earth beneath him thrummed its old, patient music. And so the wanderer wandered on, into a world stitched gently from all the dreams he had ever dared to carry. Beneath the folds of the night sky, hidden by mist and memory, blooms a garden tended by the moon herself. Step softly, dear dreamer, into her shimmering, breathing world. Far beyond the fields of waking life, beyond the last breath of evening, there is a place where the sky folds inward, and dreams gather like mist around a sleeping lantern. There, hidden among stars too shy to show themselves, floats a garden. The moon, ancient and silver, tends this garden with quiet, patient hands. Her touch is light as snowfall, her voice a song only the deepest night remembers. Few have ever seen it. Even fewer have walked among its sleeping blossoms. But one night, when the world below was heavy with sighs and long, restless dreams, a little gardener, weary and wondering, found the gate. He did not find it by searching. He found it by listening. A faint hum, softer than breath, rose from the hills. A thread of silver mist unwound itself from the riverbanks. And the stars, just a handful, blinked once, slowly, before drawing a doorway in the sky. The gardener, small, worn boots, patched coat, did not hesitate. His heart knew what his mind could not name. He stepped through the gate. And the earth, the river, the fields behind him folded themselves neatly into memory. The air inside the gate was thick with starlight. Each breath cool, sweet, and heavy with scents not born of any earthbound soil. The little gardener stood still for a moment, his heart swelling like a seed after rain. Before him stretched the moon's garden. There were no rows, no neat, tidy beds. Only great swells of blossoms rising and falling like the slow breath of sleeping giants. Some flowers shone like lanterns, dripping petals of silver and pearl. Others floated above the ground, their stems too delicate to root, spinning lazily like forgotten lullabies. There were vines that whispered in voices like bells. Trees whose leaves flickered in colors no painter's brush could capture. And pools of water so still, they reflected not the sky above, but dreams unspoken. The moon moved among them. Her gown wove itself from mist and music, trailing behind her like the softest memory. Where her fingers brushed, new buds unfurled. Where her feet touched the soil, colors deepened, and music hummed. She did not speak. There was no need. The gardener knew, by some quiet thread linking heart to heart, that he was welcome here. Not as a stranger. Not as a visitor. But as something the garden had been waiting for. With a bow as deep as sleep itself. The gardener stepped forward. And the garden sighed, a soft, sweet sigh, that stirred the stars overhead into slow, shimmering spirals. The little gardener wandered deeper into the moon's garden, his steps light, his heart slow and wide. All around him, the garden whispered, not in words, but in sighs, in murmurs, in the slow exhale of things too ancient to name. He passed a meadow where the flowers opened only when no one watched, their petals spinning in the dark like tiny galaxies. He passed a brook that sang without water, a low, endless song stitched from the hush of forgotten forests. He passed trees whose roots floated gently above the ground, drinking not from soil, but from dreams that drifted like mist through the air. And always, just beyond sight, the moon herself moved, slow, sure, tender, her hands sowing invisible seeds into the deep folds of night. At the center of the gardener found a clearing. It was wide, round, cradled by tall, weeping branches that shimmered with pale light. In the very middle, lay a shallow bowl, carved from a stone so old it seemed to hum with the memory of the stars themselves. Inside the bowl, resting in a bed of silver dust, were seeds. They were not like any seeds he had ever seen. They pulsed faintly, like the rhythm of sleeping hearts. Each one wrapped in a tender mist of color and song. Some seeds glowed blue, deep, endless blue, the color of distant oceans and long, long waiting. Some shimmered green, like the first breath of a newborn forest. Some flickered gold, as though carrying the laughter of mornings that had never been forgotten. The gardener knelt by the bowl. He reached out, slowly, reverently, and cupped one seed in his hand. At once, he felt it. A memory. Not his own, but familiar. Of rain falling onto thirsty earth. Of small hands pressing a sprout into the ground. Of hope, blooming where none should have been. The seed pulsed softly against his palm. It was waiting. The gardener looked up, and there, standing across the clearing, the moon smiled. Not with her mouth, but with her whole, shimmering self. She extended one silver hand. An invitation, ancient and kind. And so the little gardener rose, heart slow, hand steady, and carried the dreaming seed toward the waiting earth. The moon led him along a winding path, one that shifted and shimmered beneath his feet. Sometimes narrow as a thread. Sometimes wide as a river. But always soft, always sure. They came to a garden bed unlike any he had seen before. It was empty, not barren, but patient. A cradle waiting for what it had never yet held. The soil was dark and deep, breathing gently as if it, too, dreamt. Above it, the stars leaned close, their light pooling onto the ground in slow, golden streams. The moon knelt, her gown billowing like a cloud around her, and with hands more tender than any wind, she brushed a hollow into the earth. She looked at the little gardener then, not commanding, not pleading, but offering. Offering him a place in the song she was forever weaving. The gardener understood. He knelt beside her. He pressed the dreaming seed into the waiting hollow. And the moment his fingers touched the soil, the earth shivered. The stars sighed. The air filled with a soft, low note, the sound of something being born so slowly, so sweetly, that it would take a lifetime to notice. The seed did not sprout immediately. It did not burst upward in a grand, sudden bloom. Instead, it nestled deeper, pulsing faintly, a heartbeat folded safely into the garden's endless dreaming. The moon rose, her hands folding like wings over her heart. The little gardener remained kneeling, feeling the life beneath his palms. Feeling the hush of something sacred settling into the bones of the world. Above them, the stars spun slower, heavier, softer. And the garden, all around, breathed in and out. A lullaby too vast for any single night to hold. The little gardener sat quietly by the place where he had planted the seed. His hands resting lightly in his lap. His heart opening wider than it ever had before. The soil beneath his palms was not silent. It thrummed. Not loudly, not urgently, but deep and slow, the way old rivers hum beneath winter ice. The way the earth itself hums when no one is listening. The gardener closed his eyes. He let his breath match the rhythm of the soil. Slow, slow, slower still. Until his body no longer pressed against the ground but floated gently above it, stitched into the hush of everything around him. The moon, standing nearby, lifted her arms. The stars above seemed to ripple at her gesture, a soft sigh, a gentle loosening. From the soil, from the roots, from the hidden veins of the garden, a song rose. It was not a song made of notes, nor of words. It was the sound of seeds dreaming. The sound of roots stretching their fingers into the cool, velvet dark. The sound of petals promising to open, not now, not soon, but someday. The little gardener listened, and as he did, he began to hum. The tune found him without effort. A low, simple melody that needed no beginning and no end. The garden listened back. The garden hummed in reply. And there, under the silver eye of the moon, the garden and the gardener stitched their songs together. Into a soft, endless lullaby that wove itself into the deepest folds of the dreaming night. When the song had wrapped itself fully around the stars. When the earth and the air and the water of the garden had all drunk deeply of it. The moon beckoned once more. With a sweep of her mist-woven gown, she led the gardener beyond the place of seeds. Through arches made of braided light. Past pools so still, they seemed to hold the breath of sleeping giants. They came at last to a great tree. It rose so high that its uppermost branches vanished into the folds of night itself. Its trunk wide enough that 1,000 arms linked together could not have circled it. The bark shimmered softly, not silver, not gold, but the deep, soft brown of earth remembered in dreams. Its roots did not sink downward. They curled upward. Woven through the sky itself. Holding the heavens like a mother holds her child. The gardener gazed up, his mouth slightly open, his breath forgotten in his chest. The moon placed her hand against the tree's broad side. A pulse traveled through the trunk, a slow heartbeat. And above them, the stars blinked, shifting just slightly in their ancient places. This was no ordinary tree. This was the axis on which dreams turned. This was the heart-root of the garden. This was the breath beneath the breath of the world. The moon gestured, a soft flicker of her fingers, and at once, a small, golden bloom opened at the tree's base. It was the seed the gardener had planted. It had not rushed to grow. It had not burst upward in a race for the sky. It had waited, listened, trusted. And now, gently, slowly, it had opened one perfect, golden petal to the endless night. The gardener knelt once more, bowed his head, and pressed both palms to the ground. Above him, the moon's light grew softer. Around him, the garden sighed, long, deep, endless, a sigh that rocked the stars gently on their cradle of roots. And the little gardener, heart-woven now into the slow, steady pulse of all things, closed his eyes, and let himself become part of the dream. Time, in the moon's garden, moved differently. It did not hurry forward. It did not slip away unnoticed. It simply breathed, slow and wide, swelling and falling like the endless tides of stars. The little gardener stood beneath the great tree's boughs, feeling the hush of the world around him. And then, from the folds of the misty garden, came figures. They were not loud, nor sudden. They appeared the way clouds appear after long, warm afternoons, slowly, naturally, as if they had always been there, waiting. Sleepwalkers. They moved lightly across the garden's silver paths, their feet never quite touching the ground. Their faces were serene, their hands gentle, their clothes stitched from pieces of old moonlight and the forgotten songs of birds. Some carried lanterns that glowed faintly with memories. Some carried empty bowls, cupping them carefully as if cradling the first rains of spring. Some carried nothing at all, and yet walked with a fullness as if bearing the weight of dreams too vast for words. The gardener watched them pass, these dreamers, these keepers of silent things, and he understood without needing to ask. They had been called here, just as he had been. Each had heard the quiet summons carried in the folds of the sky, each had followed it without knowing why. And here, under the watchful, ancient arms of the great tree, they had found their place. The sleepwalkers gathered in a great circle. They said nothing. They simply stood, breathing in the starlit air, breathing out all the forgotten songs of distant worlds. And the moon, smiling softly from her place beyond the garden's tallest branches, lifted one slender hand. The world grew quieter still, a silence so deep and sweet it hummed through the bones of the earth. Time, in the moon's garden, moved differently. It did not hurry forward. It did not slip away unnoticed. It simply breathed, slow and wide, swelling and falling like the endless tides of stars. The little gardener stood beneath the great tree's boughs, feeling the hush of the world around him. And then, from the folds of the misty garden, came figures. They were not loud, nor sudden. They appeared the way clouds appear after long, warm afternoons, slowly, naturally, as if they had always been there, waiting. Sleepwalkers. They moved lightly across the garden's silver paths, their feet never quite touching the ground. Their faces were serene, their hands gentle, their clothes stitched from pieces of old moonlight and the forgotten songs of birds. Some carried lanterns that glowed faintly with memories. Some carried empty bowls, cupping them carefully as if cradling the first rains of spring. Some carried nothing at all, and yet walked with a fullness as if bearing the weight of dreams too vast for words. The gardener watched them pass, these dreamers, these keepers of silent things, and he understood without needing to ask. They had been called here, just as he had been. Each had heard the quiet summons carried in the folds of the sky, each had followed it without knowing why. And here, under the watchful, ancient arms of the great tree, they had found their place. The sleepwalkers gathered in a great circle. They said nothing. They simply stood, breathing in the starlit air, breathing out all the forgotten songs of distant worlds. And the moon, smiling softly from her place beyond the garden's tallest branches, lifted one slender hand. The world grew quieter still, a silence so deep and sweet it hummed through the bones of the earth. Part 8, The Petal That Held a World. At the center of the sleepwalkers' circle, the golden bloom stirred. One petal, just one, slowly unfurled wider, opening itself to the cradle of night. The little gardener, heart beating slow as a faraway tide, stepped forward. Inside the bloom, nestled as gently as a child in a lullaby, was something wondrous. A world. Tiny, delicate, shimmering with newborn light. It was a world still unformed, a place of maybes and might bess, a garden that had not yet dreamed itself into being. The gardener knelt before it, his breath catching in his chest. Not from fear. Not from awe. But from a tenderness so vast, so aching, that it filled the spaces between his ribs with soft, singing light. He reached out. One hand trembling slightly. And touched the edge of the golden petal. At once, the world within the bloom rippled, as though touched by the gentlest wind. He saw rivers threading through soft green valleys. Mountains sleeping beneath blankets of mist. Trees whispering the first lullabies to the stars above. And he understood. This was not a finished place. This was a promise. A dream waiting for the hands of dreamers, for the feet of wanderers. For the songs of those brave enough to plant gardens even when no one else could see them grow. The moon's voice, soft and round as a cradle song, finally reached him, not with words, but with a feeling. Will you tend it? The gardener pressed both hands gently into the heart of the bloom. And the world trembled, sighed, opened wider still. Above, the stars spun slowly. The roots of the great tree cradled the sky tighter. And the garden, holding its breath, waited for the first seeds of a new dream to fall. At the center of the sleepwalkers' circle, the golden bloom stirred. One petal, just one, slowly unfurled wider, opening itself to the cradle of night. The little gardener, heart beating slow as a faraway tide, stepped forward. Inside the bloom, nestled as gently as a child in a lullaby, was something wondrous. A world. Tiny, delicate, shimmering with newborn light. It was a world still unformed, a place of maybes and might bess, a garden that had not yet dreamed itself into being. The gardener knelt before it, his breath catching in his chest. Not from fear. Not from awe. but from a tenderness so vast, so aching, that it filled the spaces between his ribs with soft, singing light. He reached out, one hand trembling slightly, and touched the edge of the golden petal. At once, the world within the bloom rippled, as though touched by the gentlest wind. He saw rivers threading through soft green valleys, mountains sleeping beneath blankets of mist, trees whispering the first lullabies to the stars above. And he understood. This was not a finished place. This was a promise. A dream waiting for the hands of dreamers, for the feet of wanderers, for the songs of those brave enough to plant gardens even when no one else could see them grow. The moon's voice, soft and round as a cradle song, finally reached him, not with words, but with a feeling. Will you tend it? The gardener pressed both hands gently into the heart of the bloom. And the world trembled, sighed, opened wider still. Above, the stars spun slowly. The roots of the great tree cradled the sky tighter. And the garden, holding its breath, waited for the first seeds of a new dream to fall. The little gardener sat by the open bloom, his hands resting lightly inside the shimmering cradle of the tiny, sleeping world. He did not rush. He did not speak. He simply listened. Within the world, there was a faint sound, like the sigh of distant rain, like the stirring of roots deep below unseen soil. The moon, patient as the tides, watched from the edge of the clearing, her silver gown trailing through the mist like a river of dreams. One by one, the sleepwalkers approached. They did not crowd, nor hurry. Each held something small, a gift, a promise, a seed of their own silent dreaming. The first sleepwalker, a woman whose hair was woven with threads of forgotten songs, knelt and offered a petal from a flower that no longer bloomed anywhere but memory. It floated gently into the heart of the new world, sinking into its soft soil without a sound. The second, a man whose boots were worn thin by journeys no map had ever charted, placed a single stone, smooth and warm, shaped by hands never seen. The third, a child with pockets full of starlight, sprinkled a handful of laughing dust across the new rivers, and the rivers brightened, gleaming softly against their misty banks. One by one, they came, offering small pieces of themselves, small pieces of hope, small pieces of wonder. And the world drank it all in. It grew not with speed, but with certainty, like the first curl of a leaf reaching for unseen sun. The little gardener, tears softening the corners of his smile, reached into his own coat, and found a tiny seed he had forgotten he carried, a seed given to him once, long ago, when he still believed he had no place to plant it. He pressed it deep into the world's heart. The bloom glowed, golden, tender, slow. And the garden, all around, shivered with joy, like a harp touched by the lightest of breezes. The garden grew still again. A stillness not of emptiness, but of holding, cradling, waiting for the breath that would carry it forward. Above, the stars leaned closer. The mist thickened into soft curtains, veiling the edges of the world in shimmering threads. The little gardener stood, the bowl of the sky cupped around him like the hands of a sleeping giant. In the heart of the garden, the golden bloom, and the world within it, pulsed faintly, as if drawing its first true breath. The moon stepped forward then. Not with grandeur, but with a quietness so complete it rang louder than any song. She bent low beside the gardener. She placed her hand gently atop his. Together, they pressed their palms to the soil beneath the blooming world. And together, they exhaled, one long, soft breath, a breath that carried stories and songs and sorrow and hope, stitched together like an endless, dreaming river. The garden heard. The world heard. The roots of the great tree trembled, sending ripples through the fabric of the sky. The rivers inside the tiny world widened, the hills lifted their dreaming heads, the clouds unfurled like the slow turning of a forgotten page. 1,000 tiny blooms opened across the garden. Each one a dream, soft and shining. Each one a memory taking root. The sleepwalkers raised their faces to the mist, their eyes reflecting the tender fire of stars reborn. The little gardener lowered his hands. The moon folded hers into her wide sleeves, her task tenderly complete. And for a long, long while, there was nothing but breathing. The garden breathing. The stars breathing. The world breathing anew in the soft, cradling arms of night. The little gardener stood for a time that could not be measured, not in seconds, not in years, but in heartbeats stitched across the night. The garden, the bloom, the newborn world, all rested in the soft glow of the dreaming stars. Nothing hurried here. Nothing pushed forward. Everything moved at the pace of breath and song and love. The moon circled the gathering once, her hands raised in blessing, her gown sweeping stardust in gentle arcs across the misty ground. She passed by each sleepwalker, touching their bowed heads with fingers as light as falling leaves. When she came to the gardener, she paused. Her face, vast and silver and soft as the first note of a lullaby, bent low. Her forehead brushed his. No words passed between them. Only the slow, warm weaving of understanding. Of thanks. Of promises kept. And when she drew away, something shimmered between them. A silver thread, fine as a hair, strong as the roots of mountains. It tied him to the garden. It tied him to the stars. It tied him to the breath of the world itself. One by one, the sleepwalkers began to fade. Not vanish, but slip backward into the folds of mist and memory. Their footsteps brushing the soft ground, leaving only whispers behind. The little gardener watched them go, his heart swelling with a sweet, aching fullness. He knew he would not stay in this place forever. Nor would he truly leave it. He would carry it within him, stitched into the lining of his soul, wherever his steps might wander next. The moon, arms wide as the sky, wrapped the garden in a final embrace of light. And the new world, tiny, tender, shimmering with endless promise, bloomed gently into being at the center of it all. The little gardener found himself standing once more at the gate through which he had first entered. It was smaller now, or perhaps he had simply grown larger inside. Behind him, the garden stretched away, not closed, not finished, but breathing, living, singing quietly to itself beneath the endless sigh of stars. The moon stood by the gate, her hand resting lightly on the frame woven from mist and music. She did not speak. She did not beckon. She only waited, sure, patient, the way the soil waits for rain, the way the night waits for dawn. The gardener stepped forward. And with one last deep breath, full of silver, and dreams, and the hush of new beginnings, he crossed the threshold. The gate folded behind him, soft as a sigh. He found himself walking once more upon the earth. But it, too, had changed. Or perhaps it was he who had changed. For now, everywhere he looked, he saw small gardens. Hidden in the curl of a leaf. In the hush of a sleeping stream. In the breathless stillness of a winter's morning. And he knew, with a knowing older than words, that the moon's garden was not lost behind him. It lived inside every dream, every seed, every silent wish carried on the back of the wind. And in his chest, stitched beneath his quiet heartbeat, the silver thread shimmered. A gentle tug toward every place still waiting to bloom. The little gardener adjusted the strap of his satchel, brushed the stardust from his coat, and set off once more. His steps slow, sure, and filled with songs only he could hear. And somewhere above, veiled in mist and memory, the moon smiled. And her garden, wide as the soul of night, dreamed on.